Hey, I'm David Buck, and in this video, I'm going to teach you the beginner steps to photo editing in Lightroom. We're going to dive into the Develop module, learn all the tools, and figure out how to be able to produce professional level edits every time. I expect you've created a catalog, imported your photos, and understand the general layout of Lightroom. If not, check out this video here. So let's get started editing pictures. So we're going to turn these photos into these. So let's get going. Okay, so here's the stuff you actually need to know about photo editing within Lightroom. You got to have an idea of what you want to do to a photo, and there's a 4-step process that I use every time for when I'm editing my images. Number one, you want to balance the color. You want to balance the photo to make sure that the correct things are white, because if they're not right, then your photo might look like this or like that. So you want to start by balancing the photo. Then you want to handle your highlights and your shadows, your lights and your darks. You want to deal with your colors, make sure they're correct, and then you want to make the image pop and stand out and be almost three-dimensional in how it looks. And then you want to add any finishing touches, and then you're ready to export. So 4 steps: balance, lights and darks, colors, make it pop. So everything here in the Library Develop module on the right-hand side under these tabs is called a global adjustment. So when you make a change to it, it changes the entire image. Okay? Up here, we're going to call this our Make It Pop bar, because these are all the things that you need to know, that you need to use later in the process. So here are the steps. Balance the image. You can use this white balance picker tool right here. Click on it and it picks it up. And you want to click on something that is white. Now, keep in mind that there's all different colors of whites. And I know you think I'm crazy, but the sunshot, the sunlit side of the snow is going to be a different color than the shade side of the snow. So for instance, one side of a cloud would bring more of a blue tone, the other side is going to give more of a yellow tone. So it changes what's actually white. So you want to balance the image to make it look right. You want to use your exposure slider just to get things into the general area that you want them. That's fine by me. The next thing that I do is, which is very important, is to lower the contrast. Okay, this tool right here is the thing that is going to destroy your image the fastest. I bump that up, it just destroys things really quickly. So let's use that last. So we're gonna bring that right down. And you see up here on the top, there's this weird thing called a histogram. Histogram is just a display of where the light is in your image. So where the highlights are, shadows. You'll see here, if you hover over it, this word changes from blacks. Okay, so that's showing you where your black range is. That's the things adjusted by this slider right here. You've got shadows right here. So those shadows are going to be adjusted by this slider. You've got your exposure, which is this one here. You've got your highlights, which is this one here. And you've got your whites, which is this one here. So that's a range of what you're adjusting up and down. Now this thing might look confusing, but it's just showing you where the light is in your image. And most importantly, the thing you want to pay attention to is here on the left and on the right. You don't want the lines to be going past the end, because what that means is that the image is either white or black, and you've lost all the detail in that part of the photo. So if you were to export it from that point, you would be losing all of that detail. So while we're editing, we want to keep everything within here, and then we'll stretch it out at the end to finish it off. So we've lowered our contrast, we've made sure our image is balanced. Now we want to start dealing with the highlights and the shadows. You'll notice here, there's some strong highlights that we're going to want to bring back. We'll bring down our whites, bring up our shadows and our blacks. And it looks like a very dull image as to where we started, but you'll see we're dulling it, but we're getting all of the detail in the photo that we can do with whatever we want. Now, color is one of those fancy things where we like the images to be bright and colorful, but if you were just to say, okay, I'm going to up the saturation, you're going to get all sorts of competing colors and it's not going to look right. In this case, I've got some yellows that are coming through on the mountain. I've just got a sea of colors, but I really like what's happening down here in the lake. So what I like to do is bump up my bump up my vibrance. Now think of saturation like I'm going to punch you in the face with color. So it takes all the color and just makes it more where it is, whereas vibrance takes the areas that are less colorful and bumps those up. So you've got a lot more flexibility in the vibrance than you do in the saturation. So let's bump up the vibrance, and then we'll go down here to this HSL color tab. This one here gives you all of the different channels, so all the different ranges of color, and gives you 3 options for each. Now, just so you can see, in the saturation, if I take the blues out, hey, all the blues are gone. So this gives me control over just the blue color in the sky. So we're going to handle our colors. I'm going to give the blue a little bit more. I'm going to darken the blue a little bit. I'm going to, one thing you don't want in an image is a bunch of competing colors that are close together. So we're going to take our yellows and make them a little bit more green. So right there, I'm pretty happy with the overall color. I'm going to go up here to our Make It Pop bar. So step 4 is to make the image pop. I like the cropping of it, but now that I mention it, I'm just going to adjust the image in the transform to straighten up these trees a little bit. You'll notice they're a little bit crooked. So let's straighten up the trees. And if we say constrain crop, that will straighten up our trees and keep us within the crop window. Let's click this one right up here. This is the masking tools, and I'm going to select the sky, which Lightroom is going to say, oh, hey, I can find the sky. And it's put all of our steps right next to one another. So we deal with the tone, the highlights and the shadows, the lights and the darks, then the color, and then any clarity, then what they call presence, which is texture, clarity, and deal with any detail. So fortunately for us, Lightroom's made a nice little adjustment to have everything in order for us. So we're going to darken down our sky a little bit, keeping in mind that our subject, which is this part of the mountain, we want to bring that out, and everything else is adding to our view into this part of the mountain. So we can probably bump up saturation a little bit. And you know what is even fun is right here where it says color, we can click on a color and say, I want to add some blue into the sky, and I'm going to tone it down a little bit. I'm just going to add a little bit. Okay. Happy with that. Now I'm going to add a new mask. In this case, I'm going to select the object with a brush, and I'm going to select this part of the mountain, mainly the sunlit area. And Lightroom's going to say, oh, hey, I see something there, and gives me a lovely selection. So what I want to do here is make sure that my whites are taken care of. I'm not in the selection. My histogram now tells me what my selection is doing. So I'm actually going to bring my whites right up to the edge because I want the snow to be the brightest part of the image. I'm going to bump up my contrast. Then I'm going to add some of this dehaze right here. So just so you can see what it's doing. Okay, just a little bit so that the shadows really come off the mountain. And I also noticed that I'm getting a fair bit of color in my mountain, which I'm going to take out a little bit. So color back down just a touch. I don't like this over here. It's taking some attention away from the mountains. So let's take that and we will darken that down just a little bit. Drop the blacks a little bit. Drop the saturation a wee bit. Okay, one more. I'm going to add a linear gradient, which is just what it shows right there, a line with a fade. And we're going to drop that down a little bit. Now, remember we said we dropped our contrast down here right at the beginning? We're going to dial it up until it feels just right, which is about there. If we want, we can minimize that, go to our color grading, and in our midtones, just add a little bit of red to it to negate the cyan that's coming through, or we can go a different direction if we want. There we go, I like that. There. There we go. There was our original, and there is our edit. Here we have a beautiful first kiss moment at a wedding in an outdoor ceremony event, and it's very nice to start with, but we'll go through the same steps that we've been going through all along. So we're going to make sure that we balance our image first, and then I feel like it should be a little bit warmer than what actual white is. Her dress is a little bit cream, not white, and it just feels like more of a sunny day feel is what's needed. So let's start there. Let's bring up our shadows, get some of our detail, make sure our highlights, see, notice very much in the dress are the highlights and the whites. We'll do that, bring up our blacks just a little bit. Then we are going to go right down to our vibrance, and you'll notice right away that there's skin tones and the blue in the dress, and that all looks terrible, but the rest of the photo starts to come alive with the beautiful colors. So we're going to go down here to our HSL. Remember, oranges is skin tones, so we're going to bring down our skin tone saturation a little bit. You notice right there in their skin tones, it starts to get back to where it should be. And we're going to brighten up there. Notice just for those little changes, specifically in the skin there. I want everything to look natural. So we have attention on our bride and groom. I like where the colors are, except in the dress, but we're going to do that a little bit more locally. The only thing I do notice is that there's a lot of blue fringes in the tulle of the dress, so we're going to bring down the saturation of the blue and get rid of that. Okay, so we get some of that confusing blue out of the way, and we're going to go up to our tools here. Okay, select your subject, which here is our bride and groom, and we're actually going to select the inverse of that. So we're going to right click and we're going to invert that to be the background. Is getting a little bit of his hair here, but that's okay for the time being. And I'll bring that down, the shadows down, whites up. And I really want to bring your attention into the bride and groom here. So I'm going to add another mask, linear gradient here, and I'm going to add to it by pressing that plus button and bring it in there. And we are going to bring the shadows down, the whites down a little bit on the folks around so that they are the brightest point in the image. Also, because when we brought up her saturation, it made her dress a little bit more yellow than I'd like. So we're going to brush in right here and select her dress. Notice that we have our auto mask on here on the right. So it's selecting where my plus is. And if I hold down the Option key or the Alt key on a Mac, I can remove some of that selection. So we're going to take that. There's our selection. We're going to desaturate that a little bit, bring that back to a white dress. We're going to use a new mask, a radial. And these ones you got to be careful with because they halo very easily. I'll show you here. If I up the saturation, you can see it creates a halo like that. So what I want to do is make sure that I'm choosing the tones that I actually want to select, which is the highlights and the whites. So I'm going to bring them up in their highlights and their whites, so you brighten them up without haloing the background. Pretty happy with that. I want to add a little bit more excitement into that, so I'm going to do one more mask here. I'm going to do a brush. I'm going to bring up the exposure and the whites and the saturation, texture, the clarity, and we'll paint into back nicely. And as a cool little feature, if we want, we can make it more or less with this slider right here. So we're going to do a little less. And because they're starting to look a little bit too popped out of the background, we're going to bring this all together here in the color grading. We're going to add some blue into the shadows to bring the tone together, and a little bit of the opposite color into the midtones. And by toning everything, we bring that look together. So here's our original. Here's our adjustment, and I'm happy with that. Maybe just a little bit of warmth there just to bring it up. More sunny day feel. We can, if we want, adjust our contrast to taste, which happens to be up just a little bit. And check our detail, make sure we've got some sharpening and some noise reduction in there. Let Lightroom figure out the rest. And I'm happy. Let's move on. Same thing as before. We start by balancing our photo. We've got some obvious whites here. Okay, they look really good. I could probably bring, I'm looking at their skin tone specifically. So when we bring down the contrast, they look great. The colors in the trees are great, but they don't look it just yet. So let's, instead of making the global adjustments in the color, let's jump right to making it pop because it looks pretty good as it is. So we're going to jump right up here to our mask tool. We're going to select our subject. We're going to duplicate and invert. So now we've got two, one here and one here. And we're going to start with our background. And we're going to bring it down a little bit. We're going to add our color in there. We're going to bring up our whites and our highlights and bring down our shadows. And we really want this thing to be colorful and beautiful as it was when we were there. And for fun, just for fun, we're going to add a little bit of color in there. And we can dial that up to where we want it. Add some clarity and some of that dehazing. You notice you start getting too much yellow down here on the bottom. So we're going to take care of that in just a second, but we're focused on this. What we can do is say we want to remove linear gradient here from our mask. Just like that. There we go. That's gone. And we can deal with that again in a second. You notice the grass is all dead, so we'll give it a bit of color here in just a second. So we're starting to look really good. I'm liking that. I'm thinking that we can probably bring the overall vibrance of the whole thing up a little bit. We're going to add some linear gradient into the bottom. We're going to add color. Guess what color? Green. You got it. Now we're going to darken it down. And we're going to take it back just to give it a hint. Okay, so we're starting to look really good here. I just noticed there's a couple of distractions back here in the background that's taking away. We could crop in, but if we want this to be a bigger photo up on above their couch, then we can choose our healing brush tool and we can get rid of this person right here. Magic. And then for this one back here, what we're going to do is add a new brush. I'm going to brush back in here. We want it to look similar to over there. And we're going to take the contrast right down, the shadows right down, whites down, blacks we can leave. Remember, we don't want to lose detail. We just want to take your focus off of those things. So we're watching right here on a histogram to make sure we're not losing a bunch of information. And just with that little bit, we can focus in our image. And I notice up here, there's a couple of little white dots. So let's get rid of those white dots with the healing brush. There you go. So check our image over. I'm pretty happy. We could probably bring them out a little bit. So let's select them, bring up highlights a little bit. Bring down the blacks. That makes me pretty happy. Very happy. And there we go. We've got our original. There's that one right there. And there's what we're left with. Good to go. If we really want, we could also add some of this. Add some of that, add some of that, and we could bring it down just a touch. There we go. Original, finished. I also want to show a interior real estate. We can still do a little bit to it to make it better. So there's a lot of competing colors here going on in this photo. So the same thing as always, want to make sure that we've got our color right. That looks a little bit yellow to me. See the blue here in the walls quite strongly. Let's go there and let's bring our contrast down. Let's bring our vibrance down. Actually, what we want to do here is go right into colors, get rid of our blues. A lot of blue coming in the window, and I want to balance it with the light that's coming in the kitchen. See, these lights are a different color than the light that's coming in from outside, so you got to make sure that that's balanced. I want to bring up my highlights, I think. Some blacks, shadows, give it. You want to get some, keep detail down in here. There we go. We're starting to get somewhere. So there's our before, and there is our after. So remember, there's 4 steps. Correct the color, work on the brights and darks, the color, make it pop, then fine tune it. Repeat these steps over and over as you get images into Lightroom, and you will get yourself into a great position to make fantastic photos in Lightroom.